So there's a law that's coming that says if I'm seen praying, I'm going to be chucked into the lions. What to do? Who do I put my trust in? Is God able to help me in this situation? Should I hide my faith? I just don't know what to do. What should I do? Well, this is a scenario that Daniel was in. So, what did he do? Did he hide his faith and turn against God? Or did he show his faith to the one true God alone and be cast into the lion's den? Stay tuned as we find out. Thanks for watching this video, everyone. I hope you had a nice Christmas and a new year. It's good that you're here. If you do like this video, consider hitting the like button, or even better, maybe subscribe or follow my Facebook page. Or if you just want to watch this shortish Bible study, then just stay tuned and get some enjoyment from it. I'm glad that you're here. So if you've followed any of my Daniel series that I did a couple of months ago, if you've not seen my previous video, my Daniel videos was the most viewed at the minute. So if you're a fan of the Daniel book, then I'm glad that you're here again, because today we're looking at chapter 6. So far we've done 3, 4 and 5, if I can remember correctly, and we're on 6, which is a massively famous story, Daniel and the Lion's Den. I wasn't raised in church, but it's a Sunday school classic for the kids, I imagine. Fantastic chapter. If you've not watched the other videos, go and watch them. There might be links up there somewhere, as that will give you a good insight and a good foundation for what we're building here. We've mentioned Daniel a few times in my previous videos, but this one specifically looks at, the other ones have, but specifically looks at his true faith and how he reacts in a horrible situation that any Christian or believer in God would be in. So bit of context. So chapter 5 ended with the death of Belshazzar, who was the king at the time, and in 5:30 it says, that same night Belshazzar the Chaldean king was slain, so Darius the Mede received the kingdom at the age of 62. So now we have a new king over the kingdom called Darius. So Daniel has served Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, and now Darius. And this was prophesied twice before chapter 6. So in 5:28 it reads, when it's the writing on the wall, it says, Perez stands for, your kingdom has been divided and given over to the Medes and the Persians. And Darius the Mede, obviously he's part of that, so that was a prophecy came true. And also in chapter 2 verse 32, the statue, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, again this was prophesied that this kingdom would be next. So we have prophecy predicting the future, and no man can predict the future without God's intervention. So there's a little bit of a good foundation. So we're going to do the 30 minutes. This is quite a long chapter, so please bear with us, a bit of reading here, but if you're watching it, I'm guessing you want to learn more about the Bible. So just a casual little Bible study, nothing perfect, just see what the passage says and have a conversation. So let's start it off. Daniel chapter 6 and verse 1. It seemed good to Darius to appoint 120 satraps. So I've written down, a satrap is a prince or a governor over the kingdom, that they would be in charge of the whole kingdom, and over them 3 commissioners, of whom Daniel was one, that these satraps might be accountable to them. and that the king might not suffer loss. So the king here is making a plan, promoting all these 120 people to look after certain things, and the 3 men are to look over them. And Daniel, obviously a massive high position that he's took, and he's obviously been promoted each time. Every king so far, he's been promoted because of the spirit that's been within him, the Spirit of God. Then it reads verse 3. Then this Daniel began distinguishing himself among the commissioners and satraps because he possessed an extraordinary spirit, and the king planned to appoint him over the entire kingdom. So Daniel here was distinct. He was, you could look at all these describing words, he was distinguishing himself. He possessed an extraordinary spirit, and the king planned to promote him to up at the top. And let's look at a few key words of what scripture tells us about Daniel, which gets some more emphasis on this. So I've got some notes here. So in chapter 1 and verse 8, Daniel stood up for what he believed in when they were told to eat certain foods, and he didn't want to defile himself. 1:9, God granted Daniel favor. 1:12, he mentions Daniel shows lots of wisdom. 1:17 reads, God gave them knowledge and intelligence in every branch of literature and wisdom. 2:14 shows discretion and discernment. 2:16, faith and trust and action. 2:20 through 23, Daniel gave all the glory to God. 2:30 shows humility. 2:48, Daniel promoted. 4:19, Daniel shows compassion for his enemies. Some people get happy when the enemies fail. Not Daniel, he had compassion for them. 4:27, he gives good and wise advice. 5:29, and he had authority as the 3rd ruler in the kingdom, as we've just read. So most of these traits, if not all, were all granted by God. God was using Daniel to do extraordinary things. Obviously Daniel still had to do things and live a way and act a certain way, but God gave him all these things, and this is molding up to be this character that we read about in Daniel chapter 6, and what he does all just seems to come together through the character of Daniel. So he's separated himself from other people, as the king said there. Now carry on in verse 4. Then the commissioners and the satraps began trying to find a ground of accusation against Daniel in regard to government affairs, but they could not find no ground of accusation or evidence of corruption, inasmuch as he was faithful and had no negligence or corruption was to be found in him. Superb guy. So what we got here? We see jealousy here. When you stand out for something, Daniel massively stood out with his characteristics. Darius was going to promote him, and now jealousies come from the people who want that, and now they're going to find a way to try and bring him down. But guess what? They cannot find anything, no fault in him. No fault because Daniel was faithful and trusted in God. And as Christians, we should be set apart. We are in the world, but we're not of the world. We live differently, and the way we live, our works, our actions, our forgiveness, compassion, love, mercy, all that is because of what Jesus has done for us. So this should be an outward expression to the world, and the world should see us as different. We're not perfect. We sin every day. We make mistakes, like us all. but we should still be set apart. People shouldn't find any corruption within us or anything to find fault in us. We need to keep our eyes focused on God alone. And Daniel was massively faithful to God. But these evil people, they wanted to take him down. And if you can't find a fault in someone, what do? Well, you either make one up, or let's keep reading. So 5. Then these men said, "We will not find any ground of accusation against this Daniel unless we find it against him with regard to the law of his God." So let's see what we got here. So as I just said, if someone can't find a fault in you, what do? Now they are planned to attack him in what he's most faithful to. So they knew Daniel. They obviously knew a lot about him because they knew how much he trusted God. So now they're going to come up with a plan using that as the target. So does it work? Let's carry on reading. 6. Then these commissioners and satraps came by agreement to the king and spoke to him as follows: "King Darius, live forever." I've mentioned it in the past. That's just a very polite, that's just a very natural or normal greeting to a king in this period. Might still be today, to be honest, as Daniel does say this also. So they're not trying to, I don't think they're trying to suck up to him here. I think that's a normal-ish thing, greeting. 7. All the commissioners of the kingdom. Remember, Daniel was one of the 3 commissioners. Now they've come to the king Darius and said, all the commissioners of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, all 120, the high officials and the governors, have consulted together that the king should establish a statute and enforce an injunction that anyone who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days, shall be cast into the lion's den. Now, it says all, so everyone, the 120, the 2, and other guys have all come and said, we agree. But they've not all agreed because Daniel wasn't part of this, because obviously he wouldn't agree to it. So here, the lion and Darius shows very much a lot of negligence with what he decides to do next. 8. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it may not be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which may not be revoked. When I read, I believe that was a normal thing with the Medes and the Persians. When the king made a law or signed a document, that was it. Nothing could get away from that. It's a silly rule. It doesn't make no sense, because if a king decides something stupid or does something evil, no one can overturn it. And that's exactly what we see coming up here. So what does the king do? Therefore, King Darius, sign the document. Therefore, verse 9, start again. Therefore, King Darius signed the document, that is the injunction. Now, Darius showed a lot of pride here. He just agreed to it. Obviously, they've said, if anyone worships anyone else apart from you, king, you are the king, you are the god. If anyone worships anyone else apart from you, King Darius, then send them into the lion's den. And he just said yes. He didn't fully think about it. And we can learn from something there that when somebody asks us for something or we agree to something, like the little terms and conditions you get on things, make sure you read it and make sure you use a bit of wisdom and realize what you are doing and what the impact of what you are doing could be, because this is what happens. And in this instance, it was too late. And when we sign things or we agree to things, we might be able to say no and reverse it, but sometimes it could be too late. So He's agreed. It's signed. 10. Listen to this. Now, when Daniel knew that the document was signed, he must have understood the law of the Medes and the Persians, I would presume. So he knew it couldn't probably have been overturned. He entered his house. Now, in his roof chamber, he had windows open towards Jerusalem, and he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before his God, as he had been doing previously. Now listen to this. This is, my pen's gone. This is fantastic. So, a law has been made. Anyone who was seen worshipping anyone else apart from the king, he'd be thrown to the lions. Now Daniel, he knew it happened. Now in his roof chamber, he had windows open toward Jerusalem. Daniel was a captive from Jerusalem who was taken away into a foreign land. And obviously he's looking towards Jerusalem because he's hoping and probably praying that one day he may go back to the promised land and the place of the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. So he's still hoping towards that, and I don't believe at this point, I don't believe Daniel knew that they would be returning to Jerusalem at some point, as in Daniel chapter 9, it starts off saying, in the first year of Darius, and then in verse 3, it reads, in verse 2 it reads, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, observed in the books the number of the years which was revealed as the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet for the completion of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. So this looks to me like it's after Daniel chapter 6. So isn't it awesome that Daniel in this verse, in verse 10, is giving all the thanks, the glory and the praise to God, even though they've been taken away captive, and potentially in this moment he doesn't know if they're ever going to return. And think about it, how awesome is this? So Daniel knew about the rule, yet he continued to pray and give thanks to God. It indicates his true faith to God alone. It indicates to me that it was part of him. He maybe had done it so many times that it was part of a routine, and that nothing was going to stop his praise to God. And he continued. It is pure trust in God by Daniel. He didn't conform to what the people were telling him. He wasn't scared of the consequences. He had trust in his God. And if you want to look at trust, have a look at Psalm 37, as it speaks of this wonderfully. So he continued to do what he'd been doing all the time. Then 11 reads, then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and supplication before his God. Of course, they probably knew that would happen. 12. Then they approached and spoke before the king about the king's injunction. Did you not sign an injunction that any man who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days, is to be cast into the lion's den? The king replied, the statement is true according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which may not be revoked. Again, we've already mentioned that, a silly rule. 13. Then they answered and spoke before the king. Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, they obviously knew about him, the miraculous things that he had done previously, the interpretation of dreams, the writing on the wall. They must have known who he was. Pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction which you signed, but keeps making his petition 3 times a day. Fantastic. 14. Then, as soon as the king heard this statement, he was deeply distressed, and set his mind on delivering Daniel, and even until sunset he kept exerting himself to rescue him. He's realised he's made a stupid agreement. Obviously in verse 2 he was going to promote him to the verse 3 he was going to promote him to the top man. So obviously Daniel must have shown something to him that he liked, and now he's just realised, and obviously he's distressed, and it really looks like it's upsetting him. And as we carry on reading 15, then these men came by agreement. Again, there's another came by agreement, lots of these, to the king, and said to the king, recognize, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or statute which the king establishes may be changed. So these men are very devious. They planned this, and they knew that if they sweetened and tickled if that's a saying, tickled the leg, I don't know what it is, of the king, and smooth talk to him, then he would sign this agreement, and then it couldn't be overturned. Very devious people who went deep into sin to try and send Daniel down. And it's sad what some people do to try and take people down. So the king, the most powerful man, the king, he somehow can't do anything about this, which again, as I mentioned before, is a silly rule. So what happens? He can't do nothing, the king, according to him. 16. Then the king gave orders, and Daniel was brought in and cast into the lion's den. The king spoke and said to Daniel, your God, whom you constantly serve, will himself deliver you. Let me repeat that. 16. Your God, whom you constantly serve. So if you're a Christian watching this now, do you constantly serve your God? Constantly. Me as well. Do I constantly pray? I am constantly looking towards him with hope, expectation. Not in the sense of expectation that he owes me anything, just that he is able. There's nothing that he cannot do. And he says, will himself deliver you. Will himself deliver you. And that is a very interesting statement, and we will come back to it shortly, but keep that in mind. 17. A stone was brought and laid over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet ring of his nobles, so that nothing would be changed in regard to Daniel. I believe that's like the stamp, the confirmation that it cannot be broken. 18. Then the king went off to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no entertainment was brought before him, and his sleep fled from him. So again, what he agreed to is, it feels like there's a lot of remorse, there's a lot of, he knew he's done wrong, and he obviously cared for Daniel. So what happens next? So he's gone to bed. 19, he's woke up. Then the king arose at dawn at the break of day and went in haste to the lion's den. 20. When he had come near the den to Daniel, he cried out with a troubled voice. The king spoke and said to Daniel, let's just stop there. He must have had a little bit of, I'm not sure whether the word is faith, because faith is a gift from God. He must have, from past experience, he must have believed that God was able to deliver Daniel from the lions. Because let's think of it, if you go to the local zoo and chuck someone with the lions overnight, if you went in the morning, would you go in expectation that they were still alive, or would you be like, the toast, that they're done? I think it will be the latter. But he comes down now and he says, Daniel, servant of the living God. It's important because we don't believe that Darius was a believer in the one true God, the Jewish God. So we said here the living God, and a lot of these idol worshipping places believed in multiple gods, and they're not living because they're not alive. They can't hear, see, think, or do anything. But here he said the living God. So again, he knows about this one true God. Has your God, whom you constantly serve, again, constantly serve, been able to deliver you from the lion? So he asked the question again. He's, in one sense, he's expecting an answer. 21. Then Daniel spoke to the king. O king, live forever. Again, it's just a welcoming response, but it's still incredible because Darius is the one who literally threw him in, agreeing to it, and yet this is Daniel's first words to respond to the man who chucked him into the lions. Again, what a wonderful man Daniel was. Just pure loving man. 22. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, inasmuch as I was found innocent before him, and also towards you, O king. I have committed no crime. Now, wonderful. My God sent his angel. His angel, it's only referenced the same words only in twice in the Old Testament, and the other one is also in Daniel, and it's Daniel 3:28 when the three captives chucked in the fire, the courageous captives. Check the video out. They chucked in the fire, and 3:28 reads, Nebuchadnezzar talking, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom has sent his angel and delivered his servants. So 3:28 and 6:22, same word, his angel. And we believe that this could be Jesus himself. So Jesus showed up to the three men in the fire. Jesus showed up to Daniel in the lion's den and shut the lions' mouths. And that's why I go back to the bit where I said, will himself deliver you. In my Bible, himself is capitalized. So the King Darius said, your God whom you constantly serve will himself deliver you. And that's exactly what happened. He did deliver him. Jesus himself, we think, delivered him himself by shutting the lion's mouth. Fantastic. When there was a massive problem and nothing that Daniel could do with the lions, God showed up and delivered him. Why? Because he was innocent and it was all part of God's plan. 23. Oh, and we also have a reference, we think, to the angel in Acts 12:11, when an angel helps Peter escape from prison. Again, this angel is used, and it's also excuse me, in some commentaries linked to these two references. So, pretty cool thing. So how does the king respond? Must be happy, right? You'd think so. 23. Then the king was very pleased and gave orders for Daniel to be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatsoever was found on him. Listen to this. Why was no injury? Why was the lion's mouth closed? Because he had trusted in his God. Excuse me. Because he had trusted in his God. Trust is a vitally important thing for a Christian. Daniel trusted God. He believed that God was able, like the three took in the fire. They even said, I know God is able, but even if not, we will not. And I imagine Daniel was probably the same. Even if God doesn't save me from the lions, then I will still praise and worship him, and he is still God, and we still have faith and belief. And the trust is vitally important. Why? Because the 3 people chucked in the fire, what did they say? Why did God save them, apart from it being his plan for whatever purposes he has got? It reads, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who put their trust in him, violating the king's command and yielded up their bodies. So the 3 men put their trust in him, Jesus saved them. Daniel put their trust in his God, and God saved him. Now, how is that relatable to us? Well, it shows wonderful faith in these men with God. They believed he was able. But what happens if God didn't save them? Is he not a loving, caring, compassionate God? Well, of course he is. People today in 2022 we are now, Christians may have terrible deaths. People had terrible deaths in the Bible. Look at Stephen. In Acts 12 we have the brother of John, James I believe, who was martyred. Peter we believe was martyred. This doesn't mean that God's not in control, and this doesn't mean that God doesn't care. It's that we have trust in him, and as believers today we have trust ultimately that we are saved, that even though our bodies will die, we will live forever in heaven. So trust is a wonderful thing, and it's not easy, because sometimes sometimes the world is a bit crazy, and sometimes you wonder, is God in control? But we look at Daniel, and God is in complete control. As we will read in a sec, let's finish this off. 24. This is a bit of a sad part. The king then gave orders, and they brought those men who had maliciously accused Daniel, and they cast them, their children, and their wives into the lion's den. And they had not reached the bottom of the den before the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. So the lions were real, people. If you're a skeptic watching this, they had real teeth, they moved, they bit, and the people who initially come up with a plan were very sinful and sinful acts. And in this time, well, they chucked Daniel in and he was innocent, so I don't know why you wouldn't expect them to chuck these evil people in. But when it says chucks the family in and the wives and the kids, it's a little bit sad. I don't know whether that was just in that time that's what happened. They wanted to just cut the family line, the bloodline. I don't know, but the problem is, what we need to learn, sin affects other people. The wives and the children didn't do anything wrong, but the sins of people affect others. So if a man cheats on his wife, a woman cheats on her husband, that affects both of them. If they've got children, it affects the children, affects the in-laws, the friends. Sin affects other people. That's why it's sad and evil. And that's why we need Jesus to cleanse us and forgive us of all our sins, because it's the only way we're going to be changed inside. So 25. Then Darius the king wrote to all the peoples. So some might say, what was the plan with all of this? Well, to give God all the glory and to glorify his name across the world. This is what happens. Then Darius the king wrote to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language who are living in all of the land. May your peace abound. I make a decree. So remember now, he's been fooled once, so now the next time you would like to think he would think twice before signing something. So what does he make the decree about now? That in all the dominion of my kingdom, men are to fear and tremble before the God of Daniel, glorifying God. For he is the living God, and enduring forever, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed, and his dominion will be forever. He delivers and rescues and performs signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has also delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. And that's very similar to Nebuchadnezzar's giving glory to God in chapter 4, 2 and 3. Nebuchadnezzar reads, It had seemed good to me to declare the signs and wonders which the Most High God has done for me. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. So Darius knew all about the God of Daniel, what he was able to do, that he was a living God. But the problem is, knowing is different to believing and trusting in here. Knowledge is one thing, faith is another thing. And I don't know whether he believed in the one true God. I don't believe so, but I'd have to look it up more. So then, last verse 28. So this Daniel enjoyed success in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Well, if you're a non-believer watching this video, it's simple. You need to turn from your sin and put your trust in Jesus' work on the cross and what he did for you on that cross alone. And if you are a Christian watching this, then it's all about trust. As we've read, Daniel, because he had trusted in his God. Put your trust in God. Keep your trust in him. He is faithful. Men will fail. Men will do evil things, but God never fails. He is in control. Nothing happens in the world without first going through him. So whatever your circumstances today, I'm not downplaying it, but God is in control. God knows what he is doing. Let's all keep putting our trust in Jesus Christ alone. Thanks for watching. Bye. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe give it a like. That would be fantastic. Or maybe comment on the video, ask questions. Let's get a conversation going, or message me privately, whatever. That's fine. So take care, stay safe, and join me for my next video when I get time to make a video. Thank you. Bye bye.